Hi everyone, welcome to the Aware, Relaxed, Connected podcast. Join me as we explore approaches and orientations towards cultivating the physical body, the internal landscapes, the mind, and our relationship with reality as a whole. I'm your host, Craig Mallet. Hey everybody, I am back. It's been a couple of weeks, I know, but I had a few things on that I really needed to get sorted, one of which was an entire overhaul of the back end of my website. So now things are now running off Thinkific rather than Mighty Networks, which I'm very, very stoked about. It's working a lot better. If you wanted to check that out, you can go over to courses.craigmallet.com and see all the fancy new platforms. This also means that I will now have time to be recording some more courses, which I'm really looking forward to. Podcast. It's podcast time, and today we're going to be talking about how to build and sustain a daily practice, why to do a daily practice as well. That's pretty important. Before I get stuck into that, just a reminder that my Patreon is there for anyone who wants to support me in all my research and stuff. I already have a fair few Patreons, which I'm really, really stoked about. It's kind of taken off in a nice way. If you haven't popped over to see my Patreon yet, I'm posting every single week a practice of the week. This is like a half hour to 40-minute follow-along practice. Sometimes it's recordings from my local Zoom classes. Other times I make videos just for Patreon. Either way, there's a lot of material there. You're getting a class every week. Higher tier Patreons are getting more than that, sometimes 1 or 2 bonuses a month. And essentially, even at the highest level of patronage, which is like $72 a month, that's 4 classes for $72, which is pittance these days. Some of the lower tiers, I think the lowest tier where you get access to the practice of the week is like $18 a month. So for $18, you get 4 practices a month. They're follow-along practices. You can just practice that for that week and then the next week do the other one. I am following a bit of a rhythm with that too, where, you know, in the winter periods, we'll have the slower, more kind of yin style practices. And in the summer, we'll have the more yang style practices that are more dynamic and you know, in between, with spring being associated with the wood element in the Taoist theory. So we'll do lots of tendon connecting and stuff like this and opening, and autumn being associated with the metal element, which is all about condensing. So I will be following those themes loosely. We'll kind of also just have some random classes where we introduce fundamental topics that are good, whatever the season. But that's going to be ongoing until I get tired of doing it. So if you want to support me and get loads of good practices, go over to my Patreon. It's patreon.com/aware, relaxed, connected. And you can sign up and support me and support yourself. You get a lot of decent practice. The topic of the podcast today, we are going to be talking about a daily practice, which is very, very, very necessary in these arts. I so often run into people who've been kind of on again, off again for a long time with practice. And yes, you can make some progress with this approach, but for the most part, it glass ceilings pretty quickly. It gets to a point where you kind of run down, you're feeling like garbage. That's right, practice makes me feel better. So I go and do practice. I feel better. So I stop practicing. Then at some point I feel run down again. So I practice again. And this is kind of just like a cycle, right? It's like practice in this case becomes almost like a wash, a scrub of dirt off you, but doesn't do any refining. It just gets you out of being muddy and into some sort of normal level state. And then you let go of it until you get muddy again and rinse and repeat, right? This also I find happens with a lot of the new age style approaches to practice. They don't seem to get significant depth. And the reason I say this is because I get a lot of people coming to my classes that are like, oh, I've been practicing Qigong or Tai Chi for 40 years or something like this. And I put them in a basic Wuji posture. I cue them properly for opening and releasing. And within 2 minutes, their interior is cooking. If it's cooking like this, it's because there's resistance. And if there's resistance, there's been no inroads into that resistance, no release of that resistance, no depth found. It's not a problem, those kind of classes where you go and feel really nice after the class are lovely, and you need them to, to go feel and have a nice time, but they don't transform in a serious way, let's say. So you'll kind of be stuck in this forever if you follow this method. You'll feel good for a bit. You'll do your practice, then you'll feel garbage again, and rinse and repeat. If you want to deeply transform stuff, then it is more or less essential that you have a daily practice. There have comes, of course, some nuances to this. If people with a serious practice will take time to actually let go of the practice entirely to let results kind of bubble up. But more or less, you need a daily practice, and let's just call it a daily practice. And it's not a daily practice that gets breaks, right? You don't get to have a pause over Christmas for the 2 weeks of the Christmas festivities or anything like this. It needs to keep going. If it doesn't keep going, it loses its momentum, and the depth of these arts is definitely kind of reliant on this momentum that's built by a daily practice. So, um, if I kind of liken it to push starting a car. The first few days are going to be this struggle to get it going, and then boom, the car's going, and then you can drive. And if you keep driving and don't stop the car, then it'll be fine. It'll actually go really far. Whereas if you stop the car and then have to push start it again, there's all this effort required to get it going. And there are some certain thresholds that just don't get past if you're not practicing every day. This kind of glass ceiling feeling where it just becomes business as usual, right? Any practice at the start will, of course, deliver interesting results. If it's new to you, you're going to get this period of change, even if you're not practicing that well. But at some point, it'll stop giving the same benefit that it used to. And it can get very stale. It can get like rinse and repeat. I'm just doing the same thing. Barely anything changes, like microscopic changes over a long period of time. But this, for me, for example, happened for I know, a good 6 years where I just had the same practice. I was practicing a lot, but not every day. And it wasn't really going deeper for whatever reason. It didn't feel like I was changing much. I couldn't tell you the difference in quality noticeable between year 4 and year 8-ish. Just kind of same, but different. We don't want to do this. Don't waste your time like I did. There's ways to keep this stuff going. So the two things that you need, one is you need a good process, because if you don't have a good process, this can glass ceiling you. But secondly, and the thing I'm talking about in the podcast today, is a daily practice that keeps the momentum going, keeps the momentum that you've built rolling and actually gathering. And so you'll have two kinds of practices. There are practices that increase momentum and practices that maintain momentum. Practices that increase momentum, obviously you want more of this. The internal arts skill curve is like a logarithmic curve. It stays pretty flat for a while until it gets traction at one point, and then it can take off, and you start getting results that are like every year are more than the previous 10 years put together, and then the year after that are more than that past year, and on and on it goes, where it's just like every year is better than everything you've ever done before. And so that just can keep growing if you maintain momentum. But if you don't, you never get that takeoff. It just sort of stays kind of surviving, maybe feeling all right, but never going anywhere. So how do you maintain the momentum? The way I did it was with I started it with a challenge. I gave myself a 300-day challenge to practice every day. I think I met that challenge and missed one day, and it was like this funny, waking up in the middle of the night, realizing I just totally blanked on doing my practice. And to be fair on me, it was a big day. It was the day I proposed to my wife, and also happened to be, I think, my 30th birthday at the time. So a lot going on. So I gave myself a pass for missing one day and kind of just got back into it the next day. But this challenge worked really nicely. At the end of the challenge, I just kept going with the daily practices. But I also got a little bit militaristic. Back then, a lot of the motivation for doing it was this kind of fear of not achieving. if I just did this and achieved all the things, then, I'd be a kind of worthwhile person, or some variation of this. And while that might not be avoidable for everyone, if you can avoid it, I would. I'd find a way to get motivation based on curiosity, on exploration, on discovery, rather, which is kind of joyous, rather than on this, like, if I don't do it, I'm a horrible person motivation. You definitely don't want to have that tone. It's not a nice tone to have to deal with. And I went through that. I know plenty of people who went through that kind of, I'm not a worthwhile person if I don't practice, so I'm going to bully myself into practicing, essentially. And a lot of them, when they kind of let go of that, let go of their practice entirely, which I think is a bit of a shame. It's usually not the problem of the practice, just the problem of that particular motivation. So first of all, we need this attitude. We need to get our attitude set correctly, the orientation set correctly. And this is just about approaching practice with this curiosity. If you've listened to any of my non-dual stuff, you'll notice that when we tune into the always and already, that has nothing to do with how well developed you are in any skill set, because it's always and already. It's completely conditionless. And so to realize that stuff, to get tuned into the always and already, doesn't actually need a particular skill set of any kind. Then why do the skill sets? Well, again, it comes back to this idea of curiosity. It comes back into this idea of discovery. What else could there be? What else might reveal itself in the next moment and the next moment? Still connecting to the moment, right? Still connecting to the perpetually unfolding eternal now, but in this, like, whoa, what are the possibilities? What might happen? What is happening that I'm missing right now, right? Is this kind of curiosity of how life works. So once we got this curiosity, then we want to start establishing a daily interaction with it. It's a daily time where you just get out of the kind of habitual rhythm of your life and get into looking at what's actually going on. So often if we get in this rhythm where we're just doing, wake up, do the same morning routine, go to work, get home, I'm a bit tired, I'm going to Netflix and chill, and then go to bed. Or maybe Netflix and no chill if you don't have a partner. um, from that can just, like, 10 years can disappear like that. So the idea of this practice time each day is just a moment to really get curious about yourself. What is this body that you apparently exist with? What is this mind? What are the interactions between them? How do I relate to my interior? How do I relate to my exterior? Actually having a look at it and seeing what's going on. So we start to develop this period in the day where it's really like, stop the habituation of day to day and look what's going on. We just have a moment that's almost like a little bubble of time where we're just out of our habitual, automated participation in life. So we kind of interrupt it on purpose. We do whatever practices we do to look at our life and study the present moment and get more connected to it and all the rest, the now. And then we put that down and go back about our lives and see how that little study helps us connect to our lives more thoroughly. That's the basic idea. If you can do this every day for a decent period, that's super good. It's really nice to have a kind of half hour a day time for yourself. And in the modern era, it's becoming almost necessary. It's becoming, the world is so crazy that you can't get away with not doing this anymore. If you don't do something like this, then all the imbalances of the modern world come chasing after you and will make you sick or will make you depressed or will mess up your head or whatever, So it's almost becoming crucial to do this. You can put it off. And like many people are finding, if you put it off, if you don't do a practice like this, and I'm not saying my practices, but a practice of self-cultivation, of interior exploration, if you don't have a practice like this, usually it'll come back to bite you these days. Usually you get into your, it's okay up until your 40s. You kind of rely on youth and vigor through your 30s and 40s, and then you get into your 50s and you start slowing down. In your 60s, it's getting pretty bad, and maybe you're starting to see kind of old age diseases, quote unquote, which have nothing to do with old age and everything to do with just maintaining shitty habits for a long time. Um, Maybe these will come about and start harassing you more and more. And we're seeing these diseases, all the cancers and the dementias and everything like that. And I'm not saying there aren't circumstances where these are completely to do with habit, but I suspect if we worked on ourselves a lot more, we'd see less and less of these. There's still, of course, going to be genetic reasons for them and all the rest. But anyway, I digress. Back to making a daily practice. It's to help you discover yourself and get in a better relationship with yourself. And we're trying to make it work every day. So let's say you've kind of decided you're going to do half an hour to an hour each day, and you're plodding along and it's all working fine. And then comes the day where it doesn't go according to plan. What do you do on this day where you'll wake up early, you've got stuff on all day, it's been a long day, you get to the end of the night and you're so wrecked you cannot even fathom doing half an hour of practice? What do you do on these days? For these days, we need something that I've grown to call a thread practice. The idea here is if we want to keep our practice connected, maintain the momentum, we need at least a small time where we turn our attention towards these qualities that we're building, this internal connection, this opening to awareness and now and the interior and all the rest. For my work, it's opening to the qualities of opening and releasing, right? Um, if we have just a little moment where we stop and consider this, even for a few minutes, then it keeps the momentum of the practice alive. It'll keep all the development you're doing alive, and you start to use this little thread to bridge the previous good practice with the next good practice. And maybe a thread needs to exist for a couple of days, but it starts to be like the thread kind of weaves the beads together. The beads are the good practice days where you do half an hour or more, maybe even 15 minutes or more. And the thread is this little, like, just 3 minutes, like 3 to 5 minutes. So you're going to just about to go to bed. You're completely wrecked. 3 minutes. Anyone can do 3 minutes right before bed. You're not going to lose much sleep. Just stand, find opening and releasing, sit, do a bit of breathing, do something. Usually if it's something related to what you're doing, that's really good, but it can be anything, right? Anything where you turn your attention to your cultivation qualities. So the idea of this thread is you keep it going every day and you use it to weave the good practices together. It's like a maintenance of momentum. And if you keep this going, then you'll find that as even if you have 2 days that are a thread day or 3 days that are a thread day, you get back into your practice and the momentum's still there. Rather than it having all fallen off and you feeling garbage because you didn't do your practice, you're actually like, hell yeah, I'm ready to get back into it. It was a bit of a busy couple of days, but let's get stuck into it now that the time is back. And so you get right into it and you kind of pick up where you left off rather than having to rebuild this whole daily habit or anything like that. So from there, you've got this, this idea of the threads, and the thread practice is really should be something fundamental, right? Something that is connected to any projects you're working on at that point in time, or fundamentally connected to the entire practice that you engage in. For me, a good thread practice is either Wuji, the standing posture practice that I do, a seated version of Wuji, just letting the posture open and release, or some breathing. These are pretty good thread practices. Non-dual meditation is also another excellent thread practice. So just 3 to 5 minutes of this kind of thing. And then the next day or the day after, get back into what you're doing. Every single day has a practice if you use this thread, and there are no excuses for time or anything for not doing 3 minutes of practice. It's just building a habit. So might need a little bit of force to get the habit going in the start. And I'll talk about let's talk about that now. I'll talk about how to insert a habit into your day. So say you have this thread practice. It's really, really useful to add it to an existing habit. So say you have a morning routine, you wake up, you brush your teeth, you wash your face, whatever you do. And then just at the end of that little routine, every single time you do your thread practice, 5 minutes of standing or longer if you have time. Or you can replace an existing habit. So, say you have a bad habit of scrolling on your phone. Anytime you notice you want to go scroll on your phone, instead stop yourself, go stand for 3 minutes, and then carry on about your day. This way, you've got your thread in. So, replacing a habit or gluing it to an existing habit are really, really good ways to have the thread already be there, right? If it's stuck to a habit that already exists, then it's going to show up every day. Putting it just like randomly in the middle of the day, it's pretty tough, especially if it's floating around. It needs to kind of be somewhere where it's going to be consistently there no matter what. You can have it right before bed, right as you wake up, either are good. Right as you wake up is really nice because if you do a little bit of practice when you wake up, you'll feel pretty nice for the day. It kind of sets the tone nicely. But, some days we don't have the choice to do this, so doing it just before bed is perfectly fine too. So once you have your thread, then you don't just want to do a thread practice, right? You don't want to do the bare minimum. The thread is not going to gather momentum. The thread won't actually move the practice along. What the thread does is stops the practice from dying. And we want to recognize this, that we don't want to just rely on the thread. I'll just do the bare minimum all the time. We actually want as many good practices as possible, as many good practices as you can without escaping your life, right? As many nice periods of practicing where you can actually develop momentum and gather stuff. At some point way in the future, when you've been practicing for a long time, a lot of the practices are so innate that you kind of end up doing them throughout your day while you're doing other stuff. And this can be, one of the causes of a lot of momentum. But a lot of beginners would be like, oh, cool, I'll just implement that way from the start. And in my experience, it doesn't really work. At best, it kind of, it like introduces the ideas and maybe you'll get a bit of traction with it, but it's not going to grow in any significant way. It's not going to get depth in any significant way. So you really need to come to this idea of daily practice, of daily good practice. So start working up towards your 15 minutes, 30 minutes a day. And remember, the tone of this time is time for you to discover your relationship with yourself and the world around you. It's not for you impressing me. It's not for you impressing anyone else. It's not for you to gloat about it on Instagram. It's just for you to discover and explore what's actually going on for yourself. From here, you might want to actually start to engage in projects, right? So one of the first projects I get with people is getting to the point where they can stand for 30 minutes without it being too much of a trouble for them, getting used to the feeling of the burning blockages. And, with this kind of practice that I do, every single day is leg day. So people getting stronger legs, able to stand on released legs or releasing legs for a long period of time without it being too horrible, or actually just that they can survive that period of time. So that can be an initial project, and that has all sorts of little side quests associated with it where, maybe you're standing for a bit and it starts to become apparent that a knee is a bit funky and you need to do some rehab on the knee, and then you stand a bit longer and, the spine needs work, and so on and so forth, or the feet need work. So the projects are there to kind of get to a certain point, to enliven something to the point where it's available for you without you needing to do anything special about it. So, to do a project for standing, for example, would mean that you get to the point where on any day someone's like, let's do 30 minutes of standing. You just go, yep, no problem. And you just do it. And it's not a big deal and it's not a huge catastrophe to engage with. It's not this dreadful thing that you hate. Then you can have little projects like this, and say you're working on a standing project, and so you're building up to 15 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day, 25, 30 minutes a day, maybe going a bit beyond this to 40 minutes or an hour, and you're building this momentum of standing in Wuji in this static posture every single day. Now, as you get that momentum, can often be that it feels so good to have the momentum gathering that you don't want to do less than this. And this is a trap you need to get yourself out of, because it will sever the thread. you will run into the world's worst day at some point. If you're training every single day, your training will meet all kinds of days. Wonderful days where it's just the easiest thing in the world, the worst days where it's the hardest thing in the world, and everything in between. If you're not willing to do less than a perfect training, you are going to find a day that punches that perfect training right in the face. All the concepts of training for half an hour, 40 minutes go out the window, and you end up not training. So it's really crucial, once you build a project and build your daily practice up to this point of being able to do 30 minutes, 60 minutes, not a problem, that you're still willing to accept doing less, a little less perfectly, but still doing something. That's so much better than like letting the whole thing fall over. The amount of people I've met who've done like 6 months, 8 months of an hour a day, and then miss a day and it all falls to shit, and it takes them like 3 years to get back on the bandwagon, is really high, really, really high. Keep the thread alive. Yes, it might drop down to 5 minutes for a few days, and then it might only pick up to 20 minutes, but at least it's still there. And in those 3 years that the person who dropped the ball is not practicing and not gathering momentum and not gathering depth, you're gathering something. You're actually developing it. And, not to make this a competition over who cultivates better or anything like this, but the idea is to, we don't have so much time in this life. Don't waste your time not doing things you actually want to do. If you want to do this, if you're engaging in a practice, if you're interested, then do it, and do it properly. So yeah, you've got your projects, they're going to build up. You're going to have need these thread days to actually link the good practices together across a bridge of like this crappy day. So you have, an hour, an hour, an hour, an hour, an hour going for 2 months. One day, 5 minutes, crap, but the thread's still there. The next day, 5-10 minutes, the thread's still there. And then, hey, I'm back at my hour, and it continues. And the thread has joined the project. So this is crucial to get the hang of if you want a daily practice. You need to keep the thread that weaves the beads of good practices together, kind of like making a mala or a rosary. The thread weaves the good practices together. Okay, next thing to talk about in a daily practice is how to approach these projects, and can you do other practices in this time? And most certainly the answer is yes, if you have the bandwidth. So if you find yourself practicing, you feel like it's a good amount of practice, but you want to go to Monday class and see what Monday class is about and, learn some things, by all means, go do this. I would get used to keeping your personal project alive while still giving yourself some permission to add some like spice of workshops from other people's systems, getting new angles on things. You'll be surprised how, if you have this attitude of, here's my project again, I'll use the example of like, I'm working my Wuji so I can get my standing up to 30 or 40 minutes, and I'm going to go do a Tai Chi workshop, and they're not going to talk about static postures at all. They're going to go do some Tai Chi, and suddenly they do all this Jiven Gong from Tai Chi that's actually really helped my static posture, my Wuji posture, and I go home from that, and I don't necessarily continue with the work from that workshop, but that work has influenced my project, and now my project is bubbling along at a whole new level thanks to that. So we want this idea that we really want to explore, projects of different kinds. So we have projects that are kind of ongoing for, anywhere between 3 months and maybe 2 years, depending on the depth of the project. And then you have these other interactions, these things that are like spices, or, at one point I called them like moons that orbit the main planet. So you can have things that you're doing 3 times a week or 2 times a week. Maybe you like flexibility training, so you're doing your standing practice every day, but twice a week you do a big stretch session as well. Nice, lovely way of setting it up. Then you've still got a daily practice. The daily practice is still linking together a main project. And then you're just doing these like little, almost like on the side, little side projects too that might not be daily. The cool thing about this setup is that daily practice is also going to link those those practices that might only show up once a week, twice a week, or something like this, or even once or twice a month. You're going to find that the benefit of having the steady daily thing going starts leaking into everything else, starts leaking into your flexibility training, Um, or even going to the gym. I went to the gym. I did one session off at the gym because some friends were like, "Oh, come check out this gym." Uh, it was just a basic gym where we did some lifting. I think it was like deadlifts and single leg squats and stuff like this. And what I got from that is I did that training, and then the next 3 days, you get the DOMs from lifting like that. All of those muscles lit up like a little Christmas tree, came into my daily practice. And instead of that practice at the gym being detrimental, it actually helped massively. And it informed my practice for like the next 2 weeks, I think. And I got so much more benefit from that than just that one session because I was doing my daily practice. And some of the days of practice weren't super long. Maybe it was only 10 minutes on some days. My practice personally is a lot more free than it used to be. I'll do anywhere between 10 minutes and 5 hours, depending on the day. But, I always do something every single day. And it was really noticeable how this one-off little event affected that something every day. And it's because I have that momentum, that kind of stream of daily practice going quite effortlessly these days for me, that if I go do anything, invite me to a new class of something I've never done tomorrow, and that's going to not only be informed by my daily practice, but also inform my daily practice. So we start to see, yeah, here's my daily practice. I've got my little project. It's woven together by threads. And then I might have a few side projects going on that come and go. They're here only a few days a week. And then I have the really intermittent stuff, which is just like one-offs that I do here and there. Um, and all of it gets woven together by the thread of daily practice, the thread of this short 5 minutes. Pardon me. Um, the good thing about this, and especially if the thread, for me, the thread has to be something like opening and releasing, right? If it has a really fundamental quality to it, then no matter what I'm doing, I'm deepening, opening, and releasing. Whether I'm working on something externally, like muscular release and getting the structure more and more sorted and getting my injuries more and more sorted, or something internal to do with how the awareness moves through the system and causes opening and releasing itself, and how that's now showing up in my meditation. So even if I don't try and open and release, it happens anyway, then everything starts informing everything else. So maybe I don't even do Wuji for like a year. I'll come back to that with my daily practice in between, and it will have an improved without me practicing because of the daily practice. When you practice this way, everything constantly gets informed by everything else. Everything constantly improves everything else. I just came back to doing some basic strength and flexibility work. It seems time for it. I've been doing some push-ups as a kind of little spicy thing that I just do randomly in a kind of grease the groove fashion, throw 10, 15 push-ups here and there each day. And I'm just really, really pleasantly surprised with how, for one, how different the experience is for me now that my system has changed over the years. And for two, how little strength I lost, given I haven't done push-ups in probably a gazillion years. There was maybe like a week of my system going, what's this? Oh yeah, that's right. But even better than that, my shoulders are now more open, my elbows are more open, my hands are more open. I've got more contact with my back through my arms, that my push-ups are actually working entirely different muscle groups in a much better way. I'm not doing this kind of torqued, distorted, horribly tense mess of a push-up now. It's actually what feels like quite a good push-up, and I can do a stack of them. So it's surprising. At the same time, the push-up is following the opening and releasing principles. And so I'm able to now release these kind of bubbles of opening through the back and down the arms that help me come up out of the bottom position of the push-up. And this is possible because I've been exploring this stuff for a long time. It became immediately obvious. If you don't have a daily practice, that will never happen. You'll never get to that point. So we need this thread. We need the red thread, to sew everything together. And if you keep that alive, and if it's something really relevant, then you'll really find that everything else benefits in a big way. You'll know your limits better. You'll understand yourself better. And if you bring this attitude of curiosity to it, then it becomes something really exciting. It becomes something actually that you look forward to in your day. You're like, oh, I wonder what I'm going to discover today. I'm really keen to get to my practice. I'm looking for this enjoyable moment where I connect more deeply with myself. I want to finish this by bringing up a little quote that I might have mentioned in the podcast. I've definitely thrown it in a bunch of my articles. It's going to be in my book that I got from Adyashanti, I believe. I don't know who he got it from. I don't even know if I actually got it from him, but I'm pretty sure it's him. And the idea is that practice is not a path to reality. Practice is an expression of reality. And when we build this joy into it, this joy of reality discovering itself into each day, then it becomes this joyous moment. And the more you practice that formally, the more informally you'll be kind of joyously discovering each moment as it appears and disappears. So you really want to cultivate this attitude quite intentionally. I think at the start is a really good idea to find this joy of practice, this joy of momentum too, of whoa, I've kept the momentum going and it's building now and that feels good, to cultivate the joy of the momentum of practice by keeping the red thread through everything, by keeping the thread practice going every day, even if you have the world's worst day. The thread practice can be this little moment where it's just like, ah, nice. I actually, despite a terrible day, I had this one nice moment of like curiously exploring my mind, my body, my relationship between interior and exterior, and so on and so forth. Sweet. So I think I got my point across pretty well there. I hope I did anyway. This is actually the second time I recorded this. The first one was a bit of a mess and I didn't like it, so I nuked it. And it's also part of the reason it got a little bit delayed by about a week. So I think this one actually has gotten to the point I wanted to make a lot more clearly. I hope you really enjoy this and I hope you find something for this that can help you establish a daily practice. It's really a marvelous thing to have a practice for yourself that lasts in the long term. My daily practice has been going well more than 10 years now. And in that time, I've really, stuff has changed dramatically. I recall the first 10 years of my practice where I didn't have a daily practice. I was practicing 4 or 5 times a week for sometimes 3 hours each practice. So it could be, in the range of 10 to 20 hours a week or more. And I didn't nearly progress nearly as fast. I was actually really stuck and stagnant in a lot of ways in that time. And I really attribute the unsticking to getting a good daily practice going. That good daily practice is now with me for life. There's just no chance that I'm going to lose it. There's no chance that I'm going to stop doing this. I have changed schools. I have changed teachers. I've done all of this stuff, changed methods completely, changed systems of exploration, but I still have a daily practice, whatever I do. And if you take one thing from any of my work, it's to make a daily practice of self-cultivation, whatever it looks like, and just keep it for the rest of your life. And use this thread idea to keep it alive and keep it gathering momentum, whatever you do. So I hope you're successful in that endeavor. Some people will have a much harder time than others for whatever reason, karmic reasons or something like this. Some people, it actually ends up being a practice to establish the practice, which is really fascinating to work with. But keep the sincerity there, keep the curiosity alive, work at it. No matter how many times you fall off the path, jump back on again, you will get there eventually. You just have to stay sincere more than anything. Really keep that curiosity alive and it will serve you. Purposefully cultivate it every single day, even if it's just for a bit of time, to keep the thread going, and the momentum will slowly appear. And once it appears, it's like an unstoppable freight train. You won't have any troubles keeping up your practice after a certain point of momentum, no matter what happens. You get thrown in the gulag. Cool, I'll practice in the gulag. Not a problem at all. So enjoy that. Please write to me if you have any examples of this. It can be really nice to hear other people's examples. And otherwise, I'll catch you next time. Bye.